The inner critic comes up so often. How many of you have felt like when you're making something, it's not turning out the way that you want, or you're making it and you just absolutely do not like it in the process in that moment? Because that is such a common experience. What I often say about our inner critic voice is that it's a part of us that at some point in our life was probably external, that we've now internalized, and it comes up often as a way to keep us safe. When I'm coming to that edge of my comfort zone and I want to try a new thing, that inner critic voice gets louder and tends to be on tape, repeat. Everybody has different examples. Some really common ones that I've also experienced are, who do you think you are? You're not ready yet. You need more credentials. You need to go get training, X, Y, and Z. Anytime this has come up where people don't like their work or feel frustrated, like mid-process, it's not turning out the way that they want. And so having that experience of, I'm not doing it right, I can't create it the way that my mind has thought of. There's so many different approaches around the inner critic, like silence your inner critic, banish your inner critic. And I'm much more on the camp of how do we embrace our inner critic and how can we make space. And that's why so much of why I love mindful art activities and practices is it just widens the container. And that can mean a lot of different things. And there's a couple of different journaling prompts
that I'm going to share with you after I walk you through a beautiful watercolor art journaling exercise. And it's all around the inner critic. So I want to explain the theme and the intention for this exercise.
One of my teachers who I love, Jillian Pransky, she teaches often at Kripalu, which is in Massachusetts, the yoga center. She talks about if you have a thimble of water and it's filled with a salty solution, so half salt, half water, how potent and salty that would be. And if you poured that same thimble into then a bucket full of water, how that salt taste and the potency of the salt would be diluted. And then same thing, you pour it into a bathtub, you pour it into a body of water like a lake with that same amount of salt. If you then were to drink from that, how different it would be. That's largely my intention behind mindful art practices, is widening that container, because the salt's always going to be there because that's part of life, but how can we widen the container?
So I'm going to walk you through some intuitive painting watercolor techniques that I love to use. We already focused on the wet on wet technique and using rubbing alcohol in a dropper so you can have these really interesting organic shapes emerge in your watercolor painting. What I also love to do is I love tracing the shapes that you then see in your image. I refer to this technique as aqua tracing, and I like to use micron pens in different shapes and sizes so I can have thinner and thicker lines. And really I'm emphasizing those circular shapes since we're focusing on that as this theme with art journaling and the inner critic. I use another technique that's similar to neurographic art where the lines are never hard-edged, and when I'm connecting one circle to another, I'm filling that in, and so it adds a lot of contrast and boldness and really highlights the light and darks in the image. It can be really fun, as well as adding extra lines or even circles and other small shapes just to add more details into the center part of that circle for you. I really see this entire art journaling and inner critic practice as a form of self-love, similar to a self-love art therapy activity or a way that I can focus on creative expression and healing. So because I'm focusing with this art journaling technique and focusing on a process of self-discovery in the inner critic, I really wanted to highlight that inner circle. So what I'm doing here, and what I recommend if you want to play with it, is you can then cut out a wider circle. So we're really choosing the container now, even with the marks that we've made. You can cut out your image into a wider container or circle, and then you can always paste this back down into your art journal if you'd like. I always love rotating the image so I can get a different sense of the shapes, and what I want to share with you are some of the art journaling writing prompts. So you can add positive words or affirmations directly within your image about yourself in the circle in different areas on the page. You can also add names of people who support your creativity. These are people that you would consider to be your creative allies. One other thing that you could do is you could write a list of your strengths, some qualities about yourself that you're proud of, perhaps things that your inner critic typically tries to dismiss. You could also write a thank you letter to your creative self or even to your inner critic as a reminder of what is it that they need to remember.
Embracing the inner critic, I really resonate with that. It feels like as soon as you do that, it gives it space. It feels like a much nicer approach than pushing it away.